because they are missing the hyoid bone, because that is still with the state as they do their investigation and present it to a grand jury. And also, the lungs were dissected. And so I think that made it a little bit more difficult to perform a private autopsy. But what they're doing is, or I believe they're doing, just based on my knowledge and experience, is they're doing further testing. They're trying to see if he did in fact drown, or if he was possibly met with foul play. I mean, was he choked? The hyoid bone, by the way, if anybody is familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein quote suicide, one of the biggest problems with him taking his own life is that his hyoid bone was fractured. And if you talk to any pathologist, they will tell you that it is very difficult to fracture this bone on your own. They basically said, you need to be strangled by someone else, or it needs to be at the hands of someone else. Or the one thing I did hear about how
there's a hyoid bone missing from a body in Mississippi, and nobody's saying why. You know the case, Nolan Wells. And this week, a crime scene investigator sat down and, working straight off the family's own private autopsy, started knocking down the rumors one by one.
They're all running together for me, with crime scene investigator Cheryl McCollum, who dispelled a lot of, I guess, rumors that are going around. And she dispelled these rumors literally based on the results of the family autopsy. Again, the family autopsy that Ben Crump had commissioned by Dr. Roger Mitchell. So I thought this was wild because I had clipped something that Cheryl had said to me, and I put it on TikTok, and I could not believe how much hate that it got when she was literally talking about the family autopsy. So that kind of told me something here, that no matter what, the mob, the internet, whoever, no matter what anyone hears, if they believe a certain theory about what happened to Nolan, they're not going to sway from that. So I'm under the impression at this point that a lot of people, they don't want the truth. They just want their own narrative. And so you can come at
no bloody knuckles, no cuts, no sign of a struggle on his hands at all. That's not what the internet wanted to hear. So the internet did what the internet does. It called her a liar. It called her one of them. Never mind that she was reading directly from a report the family itself commissioned. Here's the thing, though. The hyoid bone, the little bone in your throat, it's still with the state, still being tested. And if you know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's autopsy, you know exactly why that one detail matters. His hyoid was fractured too. And pathologists will tell you, straight up, that bone almost never breaks on its own. It takes force. Someone else's hands, most of the time. Not always. A steering wheel in a crash can do it. But mostly, someone else's hands. Nolan's phone still hasn't been handed over. Days now. The family says they just want their own experts in the room when it happens, because they don't trust law enforcement down there. And after everything, can you blame them? But something about the back and forth feels off. Like a chess match instead of an investigation.
Nolan's phone, as of Tuesday, August 18th, it has not been turned over to the DA's office, who are subsequently going to give it to the police for a thorough investigation. It's been with the family the whole time. There's been some kind of, discussion, dispute, that the family says, well, we want our experts there at the same time, almost as a middleman here. And that's very clear because they do not trust Mississippi law enforcement. But I will say this does feel slightly odd. I think I saw a lawyer say it somewhere the other day. It almost felt like gamesmanship, like who is winning here, and that's not how investigations are really supposed to go, at least not in this phase or in this.
And that's the part that should bother you. Not because it proves anything. It doesn't. But because it delays everything. And delay is the one thing families in cases like this can least afford. We don't know what that phone holds yet. We don't know what the toxicology will say. What we know is this. The questions are multiplying faster than the answers. Now let's go to Ohio. The Siders family. If you've watched this channel before, you know the name. The House of Horrors. 4 of them still sitting in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail tonight, waiting on a grand jury because they waived their right to a preliminary hearing.
But moving on really quickly, I want to go to the Siders family. That was interesting. So I was pulling some dockets on the Ohio House of Horrors. If you're listening right now, hopefully you're familiar with the case because I have a whole playlist if you're not, so go catch up there. But all four of the Siders minus Gary Siders Sr., they are still in jail, the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, awaiting next steps here. Their case is with a grand jury because they did waive their preliminary hearing. Gary Siders Sr. has been released on his own recognizance after capping out at a hospital. He was transferred to a hospital because he had some medical conditions that were not revealed because of HIPAA. I believe he has suffered from a stroke or two in the past and that he is not fully there. However, I've said this, all four defendants are required to undergo a mental competency evaluation to determine whether or not they can stand trial. Now, Elizabeth and Christina Lynn Siders, that's
Gary Siders Sr. is out, released on his own recognizance after a hospital stay, medical history sealed under HIPAA, though court filings suggest a history of strokes severe enough to raise real questions about competency. All four defendants have been ordered to undergo mental competency evaluations before this can even go to trial. And here's where it gets interesting. Elizabeth and Christina Siders both filed motions to lower their bond. Standard move. But the prosecutor's response wasn't standard at all.
Prosecutor William Archer, he filed an opposing motion. And what really stood out to me here is that I think Elizabeth and Gary Siders are going to be facing new felony charges. Now, I say that because what Archer says here in Elizabeth's filing, he says, quote, "The defendant has filed for a bond motion in this case, or modification in this case. This court should deny the modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, multiple felony twos involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. And here it is. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges."
In his filing against Elizabeth, prosecutor William Archer laid out 3 reasons to deny her, and the third one is the one that stopped me. New felony charges. Charges that haven't even reached the grand jury yet. That language does not appear anywhere in Christina's opposition filing, only Elizabeth's. Which means, if this holds, Elizabeth Siders and, it looks likely, Gary Siders Jr. may be facing something heavier than what they're already charged with. I have to be honest with you for a second. I've covered a lot of cases on this channel. Cases with victims I never met, families I'll never speak to. But this one, the idea that there might be more here, something the current charges haven't even touched yet, involving children, that one sits with me differently. I don't say that lightly. We don't know yet what those new charges will be. What we know is that a prosecutor doesn't reach for language like that without something behind it. Let's slow down for a second. Just for a second. Because it's easy, watching cases like this stack up week after week, to start feeling numb to it. Another docket. Another motion. Another name. But behind every one of these filings is a kid who woke up in that house. Or a mother who still hasn't been told the truth about how her son died on that boat. Or 12 jurors in Massachusetts trying to reconcile a wonderful mother with an unthinkable act. Stay with me here. That's the part worth remembering before we move on. All right, let's talk about Lindsay Clancy. Her trial resumes this week, and the defense has spent its case so far building one argument. A mental collapse so severe it eclipsed her ability to understand what she was doing.
Also, really quickly, Lindsay Clancy. I'm actually going to be at the trial starting on Wednesday, August 19th, covering that. So the defense case in chief has already started. And it's, I thought it was going to end this week, but I was told that the prosecution is going to also put on a rebuttal case. So it's going to go into next week as well. If I had to guess, I would say closing arguments on Monday. But so far, the defense has brought up Lindsay's mother, her mother-in-law, her sister, a nurse that she worked with at the hospital, and a doctor so far. And I'm pre-recording this, excuse me, on Tuesday, August 18th. So Dr. Condi, he is the defense's expert on just everything that, Lindsay went through. He never treated her, but he reviewed all the records and all of that stuff. And, he made an observation that Lindsay's blood was never tested, by the way, by nurse practitioner Rebecca Gelada or Dr. Tufts. And he said that this was important because her thyroid should have been checked, because after you give birth, certain things can happen with your thyroid. I think I mentioned this on this channel, that I have thyroid issues and I have to get my blood checked a lot, and especially when I was pregnant and after birth. And my doctor actually said this, that some women can develop thyroid issues right after birth or during birth. So this is very much at the forefront, I feel like, for just a lot of doctors treating women who are postpartum or who, are experiencing issues like that. So he brought that up. He also, he conceded to the Commonwealth that Lindsay was only on maybe 4 of the medications at once, not like all 13.
Her mother, her mother-in-law, her sister, a nurse she worked alongside, and a psychiatric expert who never treated her personally but reviewed every record, and who testified that her thyroid, a gland that can spiral out of control after childbirth, was never even tested by the nurse practitioner or doctor treating her. He conceded, under cross, that she'd only been on 4 of the 13 medications people online keep citing. Not all of them. 4. And then something happened in that courtroom that had nothing to do with medicine at all.
But something crazy that happened that was just so strange was that the prosecutor literally asked Patrick Clancy's mother, Sue, who basically, you can tell she supports Lindsay. She said Lindsay was a wonderful mother. Lindsay was begging for help. She's in the corner of Lindsay. And the prosecutor asked her, you're a member of the Catholic Church. And she's like, yeah. And the prosecutor was like, so are you aware that murder is considered a mortal sin? And Sue Clancy was about to answer, and the judge is like, can I see you guys at sidebar? And that's when I was like, okay, where are we going with this? What are we doing here? Again, with that said, this case is incredibly difficult.
The prosecutor asked Patrick Clancy's own mother, a woman who has said publicly, under oath, that Lindsay was a wonderful mother who was begging for help, whether she was aware that, in her Catholic faith, murder is considered a mortal sin. The judge called both sides to sidebar before she could even answer. I'll say this once, plainly, because I think it needs to be said. This case does not need internet theories about mismatched shoes and secret husbands to be tragic. What's actually happening in that courtroom? A woman's mental state under a microscope, a jury asked to decide where illness ends and culpability begins, is heavy enough on its own. It deserves to be watched carefully, not turned into a puzzle for strangers to solve from their phones. Closing arguments are expected sometime next week, once the prosecution finishes its rebuttal case. What that jury decides will follow her and everyone connected to this for the rest of their lives. Last one, Luigi Mangione.
It's wild to me. If you watch the trial, all of that has just been debunked through timelines. I'm sorry. It's just nuts. And then the last thing really quickly is Luigi Mangione. So I had made some predictions the other day, and he did plead guilty in federal court. And now his state trial has been adjourned because the defense filed a motion to dismiss his charges from the state, citing double jeopardy. And the state has until October 9th to respond. And we are not due in court for those arguments until December 10th. And then federal sentencing is December 18th. So there you have it. I mean, Luigi Mangione, he was able to get some really good lawyers that were able to maneuver this for him. Really, it sounds like his lawyers were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Although, it was a lot of back and forth. I have to think that Judge Greg Caro, who is the judge in the state case, he's over this. I've been in court with him. I don't think he wants to deal with this. I think that he's absolutely going to dismiss the second-degree murder charge against Luigi. I really do. Whether or not Luigi is charged or goes to trial for the state on the remaining weapons charge, that is to be heard.
He's pleaded guilty in federal court. And in state court, his lawyers just did something that stopped his second-degree murder trial in its tracks, a motion to dismiss on double jeopardy grounds. The state has until October 9th to respond. Arguments aren't scheduled until December 10th. Federal sentencing lands 8 days after that, on December 18th. However you feel about this case, and people feel a lot of things about this case, that timeline was not an accident of scheduling. That was a legal strategy built with real precision. Whether the state court actually dismisses that charge is still an open question. What isn't open is how much ground his defense has already gained. So here's where that leaves us tonight. A bone that hasn't been tested. A phone that hasn't been handed over. New charges that haven't been filed yet, but are already being written into court motions. A courtroom question about mortal sin that a judge wouldn't let stand. And a double jeopardy motion that could unravel a murder charge before it ever reaches a jury. None of these cases are finished. None of these families have the answers they're owed. And every single one of them is still waiting. What do you think happens next? Tell me in the comments. Which one of these you're watching closest, and why?